Our lesson today is going to be talking about nickels. In the previous lesson, we talked about pennies, and so we're going to continue to talk about money, but today we're going to focus on a nickel. You're going to be able to tell me, first off, how much a value, or what the value is of a nickel. So how much is it worth? We learned that a penny is worth 1 cent. So today you're going to be able to tell me how much a nickel is worth. You're also, you can see here, you're going to be able to identify a nickel. So if I put down a whole bunch of money in a pile, you'd be able to go through and pick out all of the nickels. The last couple things that we're going to talk about is how to trade pennies for nickels, as well as how to count a group of nickels. So those are the four big things: identify a nickel, tell me the value of a nickel, trade pennies for a nickel, and count groups of nickels. So that's a lot of stuff to get through, so let's get started. First thing, just like we did the other day, see if you can tell me which letter is underneath a nickel. Let's see what you know. If you don't know, that's okay, but think about which one. Is it A, is it B, is it C? Which one is a nickel? If you said A, you're correct. This is actually a nickel. Let's try again. So which one do you think is a nickel? If you said B, let's take a look and see. There's what B looks like. Or maybe you thought it was C. Now, they're both silver, so it can be a little bit trickier. But the one thing is that a nickel is actually bigger than this one. So that should help us identify a nickel. Even though both people on the front are looking the same direction, the nickel is actually bigger than this other silver piece of money that we're going to talk about later. So again, a nickel, you can see here, is bigger than the other silver piece. And it was letter A in this picture, and then over on this picture it was letter B. So again, that was being able to pick up and identify a nickel. So let's talk a little bit more about a nickel, because if you didn't know how to find it, that's okay. That's what we're going to talk about today. What does a nickel look like? So one of the things, I already told you that the head is looking to the left, but on this nickel, just like the penny that we talked about yesterday, this was Abraham Lincoln that was on the front of the penny. And you can see we have another head of a person, and this would be again another president. This would be Thomas Jefferson. And on the penny you could see that there was a date written on it to tell you when it was made. Well, the same thing is for a nickel as well. You can see that there is a date written on a nickel. We would say a nickel is silver in color. And then we have a head side, just like we do have a tail side. So you can see here is a tail side. On the back there is a famous building called Monticello. And again, just like the penny, it says 5 cents. So it tells you how much it is on the back with letters. The penny had 1 cent written on the back, and this nickel, since it is worth 5, says 5 cents. Now, the tougher part of a nickel is that there's been some changes to the actual nickel. So here are some examples of what you might now see on the heads. So you can see here that the face has changed a little bit, and the tails, which used to be Monticello, you can see now there might be a buffalo on the back, but they're all still a nickel. So you can see you might end up finding some nickels that have a buffalo on the back. The easiest way to help you figure out how much it is worth is to figure out the size of it, or if you do flip it over to the back, you'll always be able to see the word on the back telling you how much it is worth. So to review, a nickel is worth 5 cents. We can write it with the number 5 and then the word cents. We can also put that C sign like we did with the penny, so it would be 5, and then the C sign tells us that it's cents. And then the last way, which we'll talk about more, is with a dollar sign. So again, these are 3 different ways that you can make 5 cents and label it with the cents word, or the cent sign, or the dollar sign, but we'll talk more about that later. So let's get into talking about how we can trade these pennies for a nickel. So you can see on the screen, how many pennies do I have? I want you to think in your head, how many pennies are on that screen? So if we were to count these pennies, how many do we have here on the screen? So let me go ahead and write. We have 1, then we have 2, 3, 4, and 5. And if you remember from just this last page that we just did, oops, right here, I said a nickel is worth 5 cents. A nickel's worth 5 cents. So that is why I put 5 pennies on here, because if I were to take 5 pennies, I can trade 5 pennies for 1 nickel. They both mean the same exact thing, because a nickel is worth 5 cents and 5 pennies will be worth 5 cents as well. So again, let's do this one more time just so you can see. We've got 5 pennies, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we can trade those 5 pennies for 1 nickel, and they both mean the same amount of money. They're both 5 cents. So here's another example. If I was to try and trade some of these pennies for nickels, my job would be to put them into groups of 5, and I've kind of already done that. Here is one group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here is another group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here's another group of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So all of these I can trade for 1 nickel. So this group I can trade for 1 nickel, this group I can trade for 1 nickel, and then this last group I can trade for 1 nickel. Because again, 5 pennies is the same thing as 1 nickel. 5 more pennies is the same thing as 1 nickel. And then again, 5 more pennies is the same thing as 1 nickel. So you can see, instead of having to carry around all of those pennies that we had, I can get rid of all those pennies and make trades for nickels instead. Now that's how we can go through and trade pennies for nickels. And again, how many pennies, think in your head, how many pennies does it take to trade for 1 nickel? If you said 5, you're correct. Again, that's a very important number to remember, that 5 pennies is the same thing as just 1 nickel, because they're both worth 5 cents. Now, when we just count nickels, since they're worth 5, you have to count by 5s. When we worked on counting pennies, we were able just to put them right there on the number grid because they were only worth 1. Now, if they're only worth 1, we count by 1s. But since a nickel's worth 5, it's just like skip counting by 5s. And that's why I put this number grid here to help us with these first few problems. So what I'm going to do is 1 nickel would be worth 5, so I'm going to put it on 5. Another one would be worth 5, so I'll put it on 10. And then this one would be worth 5, so I'd be 15. So we would count these 3 nickels as 5, 10, 15. So these 3 nickels would be worth 15 cents. And the reason we're skip counting by 5s is again because a nickel is worth 5 cents. So let's try another one. Let's figure out how much we have with these nickels right here in this pile, and we'll use our number grid again, and we have to count by 5. So we're going to be skip counting by 5. We're not going to put it on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. This nickel is already worth 5, so we're going to start out on 5. And then this nickel is going to go on 10. Go ahead and count with me in your head. Next comes 15, 20, 25, 30, 30. Oh, that one disappeared. Let's make it come back to the front here so we don't lose it. The last one would be 35. So 35 cents is how much that pile of nickels was worth. And then let's do this last one. Let me make sure all of these guys are going to show up for us so that we can count them. So let's go ahead and count. There's 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45. So this pile was worth 45 cents. That'll wrap up today's lesson. Just to review really quick, a nickel is that silver color. An easy way to tell how much it is worth is on the back. It says the number 5, F-I-V-E. So a nickel is worth 5 cents, and we can write it with the word cents. 5 cents with the C with a line through it is another way to write 5 cents. We can trade pennies for nickels, and it takes a total of 5 pennies to trade for 1 nickel. And then when we're counting nickels, we have to skip count by 5 since nickels are worth 5 cents each. And that's why these 3 nickels ended up being a total of 15 cents because we go 5, 10, 15. We'll work more with this in small group today.